thought I'd ask you guys, how many of you think maybe in the next 3 years you might be buying another house? Okay, how many of you think you might have a friend, a relative, or a coworker who will be buying another house? I would think probably everybody, right? Okay, so these are things that we need to be educated about. Whatever it is that we do, we need to be educated about. Things to look for when you're purchasing a home with solar, and questions to ask. And that's one of the reasons I really like working with people in real estate, because we can work together to make sure that our clients are being taken care of and people are just prepared. So when I look at most homes here in El Dorado Hills, it looks to me like about half of the homes have solar. And I think it's unusual, because when I did this research maybe a month ago, it said approximately 9% of California homes have solar. And this is going to be increasing more and more going into that 2030 deadline to have 60% of California homes with solar. So it's going to be increasing. But here, at least, it's already so many homes have solar. I think a lot of people are moving into properties and not even really having any idea of the questions to ask and things to be aware of. Margaret's recently made me aware that there's a new solar disclosure, which the fact that hasn't already existed is somewhat amazing. I guess we've assumed that everybody's doing their job in terms of what to disclose and the things to request. However, now it's been formalized, which makes sense.
Just as December, that advisory has not been out more than a year, which is shocking.
It is shocking, especially since this Senate Bill 100 with the 2030 deadline of having 60% of homes having solar has been around now for 5 years. You'd think we'd already have that. However, it's a good thing we have it now. So things that we should be asking, I believe, before making an offer. And you can correct, you're more than welcome to correct me, go, but these are just kind of my thoughts. Is it owned? If it's owned, is it paid off in full? Because we all own our homes, right? How many of us pay a mortgage? Come on. Okay. Thank you. How many of us pay a mortgage? So yes, we own our home. It's similar with solar a lot. I would say, I honestly right now try and discourage people from purchasing if they're using financing, simply because all financing is expensive right now, regardless of whether you're talking about a mortgage or if you're talking about some type of specialty financing. Money's expensive right now. So unless you have cash sitting around, I typically kind of discourage it. However, we can all say we own the solar on our homes, but if you're making a payment, that needs to be disclosed. The buyer needs to be thinking about whether they're taking that on or whether it's going to be paid for in escrow. Are we asking the seller to pay it off in full before transferring it? These are things that the seller needs to know, in my opinion, before they make an offer. If it's a lease, does it put a lien on the property? We kind of talked about this a month ago. The traditional old school leases all put liens on the property. Not all leases put liens on property anymore. However, I would want to know that definitely before, and if the seller has a plan on how to address that, before you go into escrow and then end up in a 2 or 3 month trying to figure out if we really want to do this and how it's going to be dealt with.
You can write in the offer and ask the seller to pay off the lease. Right. I did that earlier this year. The seller agreed to it. Now, the leasing company still owns the panels that are on the roof, but then the new owner is not making any lease payments to that company. Right. So you can ask them to pay off the lease in advance.
Yes. I would just want to be aware of it ahead of time.
I'd like to add that some of them, depending on who the leasing company is, will, because we do this sometimes when they're purchasing or refinancing, because we have to have them release that lien.
Yes.
So we can come in first position and then they can put the lien on after, but some of them will not do it.
Right, right. So that's why I would want to know ahead of time, is there a lien on the property? And ask, who owns that lien? Because some of these companies, unfortunately, are no longer in business. Right now, there are solar companies going out of business every day because of the changes that happened back in April. We're hiring all sorts of people because these smaller companies are going out of business. When they go out of business, okay, so who bought that business? Who owns that lease now? I would want to know that personally before I made an offer. If it's a PPA, which is the majority of the business I'm doing right now, if it's a utility option, what is the production guarantee on that utility option? So how many kilowatt hours am I promising that we're going to produce from the solar in a year? Because there are some basic equations that can be figured out for a home in terms of square footage. Is it one level or two levels? How many adults are in the home? How many kids? Are people home all day? Is there a pool? There are some basic equations that I can do to tell you, is that going to be in the ballpark of enough for your family? If it's not, that's okay. I would just want to know ahead of time, so I would know, hey, I know I need to add on to this system, or just know that you're going to have a true up and be able to budget for that. I would just want to know in advance what that production guarantee is, and it should be simple in the contract. There's a little chart for our utility options that show what we guarantee year after year. So it should be something that's easy to disclose. So speaking of contracts, all solar sales, leases, or utility options have contracts. They should not be, oh, that's embarrassing. They should not be as long as the home purchase contract. I have seen contracts from Tesla that are like this. I was in real estate for 9 years, and I'm in solar now, and I'm pretty good at reading contracts. I looked at a Tesla contract like this, I read it and I read it. I'm like, okay, so it's a lease. And I'm reading. I'm like, wait, but why did they make this huge purchase? Oh, and they have a production. I have no idea. I really, still don't know what it was that I was reading for the client that Lori referred me. It's like, it's a purchase, but it's also a lease with a utility. I'm like, what? What is this? So if there's a existing solar contract that is not paid off that looks like this, personally, I would run. That's just my opinion. Please talk to your real estate agent. But there's no solar option that should have hundreds of pages. There's a concern there, in my opinion. I think our contracts are typically around 25 pages, and because it goes through the basic options, and then it goes through a longer option after, so you can really read through all the nitty-gritty details. That's pretty pretty common. Hundreds of pages probably would want to be concerned. I would want to see that contract probably in your disclosure period, so I can look at what is the warranty if it's owned. What are the maintenance obligations? Are there restrictions about who does work on it? We can personally do work on Paula's system. That's the way it's laid out. There are systems that have restrictions, like if anybody else touches that system, then the warranty is negated. Okay, so what happens if that company is no longer in business? So those are the things that I would want to be able to look over and read in detail, which should not be hundreds of pages, but I would want to be able to read that in the disclosure process. So regardless of what type of system it is, owned, lease, or utility option, I would want to be able to read that contract in detail during the disclosure period.
And another little additive is owned can be, sometimes people finance their solar into their property taxes.
Yes.
Over typically a 20-year term,
those.
it's incredibly expensive and people don't actually realize it. You're paying on it for several years before it even starts paying down below what you actually financed in the first place. It's incredibly expensive and some people that are looking at a house don't actually realize that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Unfortunately, I see situations where people purchased
Those wide green loans or whatever they call
stuff
them.
like that. And my opinion, which again, I would say, please talk to your real estate agent and go through the details. But if it's not a purchase that is paid off or will be paid off, I would be leery. That's just me. Yes.
I'm just gonna add in like 2 cents just to kind of put a little perspective on this,
Mhm.
is the components of the home do not last forever. Okay, we all know that.
Yes.
The roof doesn't last forever. The HVAC system doesn't last forever. And what happens is the buyer gets a home inspection or a roof inspection or any inspection that they'd like to have, and they figure this out. What's happening now is that we really need solar inspections. If you're purchasing a home with a solar on it,
Yep.
you need to get the solar advisory from the seller, and then on top of it, you have to have a solar inspection. The reason being is because these components do not last forever. And if you're looking at a home and it's got a 10-year solar, the solar system is 10 years ago, that technology is way different than the technology today. So you have to get the PG&E bill or the SMUD bill,
Yes.
whatever it is, so you can see what that system is actually producing. So it's not what the bill is in the, what the seller says I'm paying, like the dollar amount. You need to look at the actual statement so you
Yes.
can see what the solar is producing
Yes.
on that property.
You're getting ahead.
Sorry.
No, that's totally okay. And yes.
Okay.
We're down to 2 minutes.
Okay, so has there been any maintenance done on the system? If there has been maintenance, I go back and see systems that have been cooking for 10 to 12 years, never have maintenance done, they're meeting all of their production requirements. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. The reason I want to know if maintenance is done is if the company who installed it was prompt to come out and do the maintenance, and if the issue was resolved. So it's not a bad thing there was maintenance. Things that are on your house are gonna need maintenance. However, was it dealt with promptly, and was the issue taken care of? What she's talking about in terms of the production, I talked about a production guarantee. Yes, you want to know what the bills are that the seller is paying. However, your family is going to be different than their family. So what every PG&E or SMUD is going to get is they're going to get a net metering statement. You want to see that last net metering statement because you want to see what it produced. So one of the notes I made is I want to see the production over 3 years, because like production this year compared to production last year, most homes produced way more solar this year because we didn't have smoke cover for months and months and months. So 1 year isn't necessarily a tell-all. I'd want to see it over 3 years if possible, what that production was, and be able to compare it to what the production guarantee was. So, but what she is saying, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So
That's
you want
a
to know.
great point.
Yes.
I didn't think about smoke
Yes,
cover.
it affected. It did.
Yeah.
It's just there's less sun getting to the panels. So the great thing is if you have a production guarantee, if it didn't meet that, then you're going to get that paid back. However, I just want to know so you can see if there's a huge shift in production. Is there something wrong? Are there panels that aren't working? In terms of technology, typically at about 10 years, panels start to depreciate quicker. I have seen systems continue to do amazingly past that. In general, your panels will begin to depreciate quicker at about 10 years. So I would be hesitant to buy a home with panels that are more than 10 years old just because of that. So really be aware of what they are producing, and if you're seeing a steep decline, just know that's typically when that happens. And panels now are definitely, the technology is amazingly different and they are lasting longer, but over 10 years A panel today probably produces twice as much as it did 10 years
Yes,
ago.
that's
So it's
what I
just something
understand.
to be aware of, which goes into your maintenance and your warranties. B3, when a panel has to be replaced, if it's a 200 watt panel, now we would just replace it with a 400 watt panel. Like, we don't have a bunch of 200 watt panels sitting around. However, it's not always the case. All companies do not do things that way. So just something to be aware of in terms of the age of the system. An older system's okay, just know that you may need to add onto it. All families use different amounts of electricity. You just want to be educated about what you're moving into. And if there's anything that I can do to help in terms of coming up with a rough estimate of what your family needs, so that when you're buying and you're looking at what a system is producing, I'm happy to just kind of go through that process with you. Any very quick questions before I sit down? Lee had a
Yeah,
question.
quick question. The person who inspects the solar panels, are there experts who do that, or rely on your kind of company to do that?
We are working on that as we speak. Margaret actually came to me with this question, and I took it to my company, and we're going to sit down with her. We have a person in mind who we
Thank you.
think could head that up. So, Lee, I'm sorry, Bob.
Well, you know, one thing the lawyer told me is anytime you get that many documents, they pretty well can break that contract.
Okay.
Because when you say, I'll be there at 10 o'clock for $10, I'll be there at 10 o'clock maybe if it doesn't rain and if I have enough money. So you get into simple
Right.
contracts are hard to break.
Yes.
That contract probably could be broken.
Probably 20 different loopholes in there.
And my friends are a perfect example of what you need to do prior to purchasing the
Yes.
property.
Yes,
Oh my God,
yes, yes.
so sorry.
Okay, last question before Paula just like yanks me.
Slides in.
Are there significant increases in the technology expected in the near future for both panels and batteries?
Of course. I mean, I don't think it's.
Expected, not like on the drawing board.
Oh, batteries, absolutely. Panels, they just continue to get more efficient. I don't think there's any huge shift as far as panels go. Batteries, absolutely. And at the same time, they're so worth it. It makes your solar go further, and they do so much more. Like, I don't know, anybody here, if you had a power outage on Friday night, but there are people who, like, you look around, you're like, well, that person has solar with batteries, that person has solar with batteries. So they are really awesome, they do amazing things. Okay, before I get slapped, I'm gonna sit down. Thank you so much, think about all your questions.